Greetings and welcome to Outlaw Gamer Radio, the official podcast of OutlawGamers.com. This is the show where we live to play and play to live. I'm Brent Adams, joined by a man who loves him some crossplay, if you know what I mean, Mr. Lauren Baumgarten. Lauren!
What's up, Brent Adams?
What's going on, man?
I do love me some crossplay.
And for good reason. There's a lot of reasons to like crossplay. And, you know, we could dilly-dally here at the top and say things like, hi, how are you? How is your week? But let's get right into it. First up in the garage this week, GOG.com has just launched Galaxy.
Sweet ass.
That's right.
GOG action.
That's right. They don't need EBA for that anymore. They got their own sweet-ass GOG action.
Speaking of which, I just want to welcome everybody to the Daniel Kaiser anniversary edition of this podcast. Today is the big hair himself. It's his birthday.
That's right. The Grand Poobah.
That's right. So that's an official Outlaw Gamer Society. Happy birthday to one Daniel Kaiser, remembering back to some sweet-ass GOG action. Yes, go ahead, Brent. Sorry,
yes,
I didn't mean to interrupt
as I
you.
was saying before, I was so rudely interrupted. GOG.com has released a beta, and if you were one of the lucky few who went over there and entered your email address into their web thingamajig, you, like me, might now be experiencing the majestic triumph that is GOG Galaxy, their Steam-like game platform and client, available currently for PC, Mac, and Linux also, I think. But anyway, the point is that GOG is kind of competing head-to-head with Steam on this. Galaxy is in beta and has already got some pretty cool things going on for it. Lauren, have you had an opportunity to check this out? I know that you signed up for the beta. Have you gotten the client installed?
I did get the client installed, Brent, and I am slightly less excited about it than you, only because I can't figure out why I have the client installed.
It probably would help if you had some games in your GOG library, which I do. I do not. I'll talk about one of them extensively a little bit later on in the show. But I've been through the experience of buying games through the client, playing games through the client, and that kind of thing. And I have to say that thus far the experience has been good. It's not as full featured as Steam is right now, which is. I mean, obviously it's in beta and Steam's been around for years, so there's going to be some disparity. But I think that everybody is excited about the potential of a competitor for Steam, somebody in the marketplace that can be an alternative for gamers to go to, somebody that's going to put some pressure on Valve to do things. And obviously this client is all about the GOG philosophy, which is to say DRM free. You don't even have to have this thing. I mean, you could buy your games through GOG, you can download them and say to hell with GOG, and your games are still going to play. You don't have to be online. So that whole philosophy that Good Old Games has made their byline is front and present here. Although if you want achievements, if you want to play online with friends, if you want to chat with friends, obviously you got to be online for those things, but they really stress that it's all optional. Another thing they have going on is that they have crossplay. And crossplay means that you're going to be able to play with other gamers in multiplayer games. Say that they have Steam as an example. You'll be able to play with them through the games that you bought on GOG. So just because you bought your games on GOG doesn't mean you're going to be cut off from your Steam friends in terms of playing online.
Yeah, I think I agree with you, Brent, that competition is a good thing.
Certainly.
I certainly respect the philosophy of what they're trying to do. I have something along the lines, I didn't look before this show, but something along the lines of 250, maybe 300 games on Steam.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to have to be convinced to leave Steam, a company that has been good to me for the most part,
right,
for nigh on 11 years now. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's great. I'm just waiting to figure out why I want to switch over there.
Well, I'll give you one good reason. If your GOG account gets hacked, your games are going to still work, and you're not going to get cut off from them while you're waiting on GOG customer support to give you your property back.
Ooh, that happened to me.
So, maybe that's an extreme example. Maybe that doesn't happen to a lot of people, but there's one really clear case where if you, and of course now that assumes that every game you own on Steam is available on GOG, which is not the case right now. Maybe it'll change, but there's one really clear case where it would have been beneficial.
But have they said that explicitly, Brent? So do you mean the games that I've already downloaded, or do you mean all of my games? How would I access all of my games if my account was hacked?
You mean like over on GOG?
Yeah.
Well, your games aren't tied to your GOG account in the sense that there's no like need for your account to be online so that the client can validate that your game belongs to your GOG account. Your games are DRM free. So once you download your games, you've got them on your hard drive. That's it. There's nothing. I mean, there's no online check. There's no DRM. There's nothing. So once you've got those games purchased, they're yours.
Right. But what if it's not downloaded on my hard drive?
That's more problematic.
Right, because, I mean, typically, again, I have 250, 300 games. God knows they're not all downloaded on my hard drive. I maybe have, 10 at any one time or 12, and so I have a couple hundred that aren't.
And obviously, that being the case, that's different. But
at least I could play those 10, which with Steam I couldn't.
Well, you couldn't. But also, you got the option, you could download, every game from your GOG library, move it over to a storage drive, and just, swap them out as you need to. So anyway, there's options.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's definitely interesting. And I do see some of those use cases. I mean, certainly I had that issue where my account got hacked. Mm-hmm. And definitely there is this fear. I remember when I first moved to Brazil, I purchased a game through my VPN, through the U.S. store, having no idea that was not allowed. And subsequently I stopped doing that, but I freaked out like, oh my God, if I just did something that violates the terms of use at Steam, they could close me off. Even accidentally, they could close me off from all of my 250 games.
Yeah, so, and I think that fear is, I think it's well-founded. I mean, certainly, there's a lot of great things about Steam, but make no mistake that you are locked into that platform to a degree, whereas, GOG doesn't lock you in so much as, I think, invite you in. Like they give incentive for you to buy into their platform, but they don't sort of force you to be there once you've kind of taking that initial step. Listen, real quickly, answer a question from Twitter. Do Host Bad Breath asks, I never heard why Lauren left Brazil. Did he like leaving there? In 30 seconds or less, what is your answer?
I did like living there. Sao Paulo itself is a kind of a gross city. It's 23 million people. So my wife and I left because we are maybe ready to have a kid, and we wanted to be around her family who lives in New York.
All right, moving on to the next topic in the garage. Ether One is on PlayStation 4. It is one of the free games that you will receive as a PSN Plus member during the month of May.
Brent's Game of the Year 2014.
Remastered. I don't know if remastered is the right word. Recreated in Unreal Engine 4 to play and look more spectacular than ever. There is a official PlayStation 4 trailer for Ether 1 that we are linking to right now that is ethereal and mysterious and reminds you of all the cool things that Ether 1 is all about. And it also has, just like, games do, they have quotes, from various gaming
schlubs
outlets
throughout the industry.
Kotakus and Polygons and Outlaw Gamer radios. Just the regular typical stuff. But we were actually very delighted, very honored to learn that a quote from yours truly, Mr. Brent Adams. I don't know why I'm referring to myself in the third person again.
Why are you?
A quote from me has been included in the trailer, and we are just we're tickled pink. It was a very nice nod, and we are so excited for everybody at White Paper Games on the success of Ether 1. It's a favorite of ours, and it's very, very cool to see this small studio getting some great recognition on a great game.
Indeed it is. And watching that trailer again, Brandon, brought back all the memories of just why that game is so great and how emotionally powerful it is. And so if you have PS Plus, make sure you go out and get this game during the month of May. You will not regret it. Like I said, Brent's Game of the Year 2014 in my top 2 or 3 of 2014.
Yep.
An amazingly powerful game about a subject matter that I've not seen other games written about, and one that is very, very powerful. So, God damn it, if we haven't said enough about Ether 1 at this point, if every outlaw listening to this has not played Ether 1, I might have to ask for your cutback.
Nice. Way to bring in the mythos there. Let's close out the garage with,
holy shit.
I think a pretty significant thing, and that is the announcement that Oculus Rift, the consumer Oculus Rift, the much speculated, much anticipated consumer version of the Oculus Rift is going to be shipping in Q1 2016.
Oh, yeah, it is. That's right, Brent. Oculus finally announced it's shipping the consumer version of the Rift in Q1 2016. We know that the Vive or Revive from HTC and Steam is supposedly coming out this holiday. We haven't gotten. I mean, they have said it, but I wouldn't be surprised if it slipped.
Well, and they're supposed to be in beta spring, right? So spring is ending pretty soon. So they better.
That's correct.
They better get that beta on. Quick.
Yeah, so we'll see about that. But Oculus announced just a couple of days ago that they'll be releasing in Q1 2016. They said they're going to, over the next few weeks is the language they use, be revealing more details about the technical specs. Mm-hmm. We do see in the images that they show that it includes the headphones for virtual it's not virtual surround sound. I forget what they call it now. I can't remember.
But it's it's sound. It's audio for your virtual reality experience.
It is, and I can't remember. I'm ashamed I don't know the answer to that question, Brent. But
performance, man. 1 in 5 men.
What are you going to do?
Gonna have a
after 5 years, I'm getting old and it's harder to keep up. This is very, very exciting, Brent. We've been waiting for this for a long time. I was hoping it would be holiday 2015. Being so late in 2015, it does not surprise me. I'm just very happy to hear that it's Q1 2016, and I actually expect the device to come out in that time frame. I don't think, based on my experience previously with Oculus, that they would be announcing this until they had a final date. Yeah, and I will definitely, of course, be pre-ordering this device and purchasing it on day one. And I will talk about this a little later. Because of that, I upgraded my video card.
What did you upgrade to?
We'll talk about that later.
Okay.
I'll talk about it later.
Said.
That's exactly right.
So anyway, for my own part, I'm also pretty excited. As I said long ago, when you backed Oculus and got the first dev kit,
DK1, yeah.
I said that I wanted to wait for the consumer experience. I wanted to wait until they'd worked out all the kinks and all of that. And so we're rapidly coming up on that, assuming that they meet this target window. And it's very interesting to kind of be faced with it now in light of the fact that there's some competition out there. We know that Steam is planning something that they're going to be releasing. Obviously, we have Project Morpheus for the PlayStation 4 that is that I'm sure we're going to be finding out more about that quite soon as well. I have to say that I think the thing that I really would like to see at this point, the thing that would maybe help me make a decision, is to find out about the games. They tease that a little bit, and they say that I think next week we're going to start finding out about some of the applications and some of the games that have been in development for Oculus Rift that we can expect to see. And I'm very excited about that. I think that
indeed
adding Oculus support to existing games definitely gives us an idea about what's possible. Yeah, exactly, what the technology is able to do. But seeing things that have been designed from the start to be virtual reality, I'm very, very curious about that kind of content. So I'm going to be watching this very closely as I kind of try to decide what I want to do, whether the video card that I have now, whether the 970 I just got is going to be capable of supporting VR in any meaningful way.
The one other piece, Brent, that I think is outstanding still for us to learn about are input devices. So hopefully we'll find out about all of this at E3. And Brent, it won't be too much longer that I have to actually see you in reality.
Yes, I also have been longing for the day when I no longer have to see you in actuality. Just think about when we can do this show in VR and like our own like little virtual clubhouse, that we create for ourselves in VR, and like the Outlaws can actually gather in the clubhouse and listen to the show.
That's what I was going to say. We'll actually have them be able to sit around for recording sessions, maybe.
I mean, I'm not telling you it's going to happen next week, but it's going to happen next week.
It could happen.
Welcome back to the Clubhouse, and we're going to talk about a really interesting kind of topic that ties in with some timely stuff. But before we get to that, we're going to talk about the poll results from last week's discussion on tours in gaming. Lauren, would you like to share
before we get to the interesting stuff,
yes,
let's talk about this stuff. Now,
Brent, that poll? I mean, I don't know about that.
Brent put up a poll from last week. I gave you guys 3 choices, and I'm going to break it down for you on how it shook out. The question was, do you think amateurs are good or... I'm just kidding. I could see Brent on the other side going, oh, wait. Do you think auteurs are good or bad for gaming? Brent gave you 3 choices, coming in very last place. Milkshakes are good. Auteurs are bad. Yeah. 5% of the vote. I don't understand what the Outlaw gamers have against milkshakes, but coming in second place with 38% of the vote, fire is bad. Auteurs are good. And coming in with 57% of the vote and in first place is the answer, screw this auteur thing, give me a milkshake made of fire.
Hell yeah.
I have a feeling that those votes had only to do with milkshakes and fire and nothing to do with the subject of auteurs.
I was really craving milkshakes at the time this poll was created. I wanted it bad. Anyway, thank you very much for voting and for sounding off on that discussion. Let's move on to this week's discussion. Konami, as you all know, has canceled Silent Hills, the Guillermo del Toro, Hideo Kojima, and Norman Reedus starring venture. And as a result of that, PT, the so-called playable teaser for the game, and a very unique game experience, has been pulled from PlayStation. If you have it on your PlayStation right now, you can play it. If you hadn't already gotten it through the store, or if you had gotten it through the store but only had it in your library and did not have it actually downloaded, you are never going to play it again. Is at least the intention. Now, that's not to say that people aren't going to steal it and pirate it, crack it, and figure out how to make it work otherwise, but at least Konami's intent is that nobody's ever going to play it again, because as far as they're concerned, the purpose of advertising that game, the purpose of the demo was to advertise the game. The game's not happening, so there's no more need for the demo. But it does raise a very interesting question, something that we have talked about a few times over the years, and that is the preservation of games, the historical preservation of games. And here's an example right here about a game that for all intents and purposes is now dead. There are a finite number of copies in the world on physical PlayStation 4s, and when those cease to operate, that game will be over. Were it not for piracy and people who make it their business to get games like this cracked and in working order. So isn't that a problem? Isn't that something that we ought to be fixing? And what about online games? What about things like World of Warcraft? Games as service has become the watchword in the recent console generation, and certainly it's not going to change in this one. So while certainly any old arcade game, any classic Nintendo title, yeah, you might not be able to get a working cartridge, you might not be able to get a Nintendo, but I promise you I can get you a ROM of that somewhere. But technically it's illegal. So what are we doing about this? What is the recourse? Why are game companies reticent to allow their games to be preserved? Lauren, what do you think about all this?
It's an interesting subject, Brent, and it's one that I've always felt like our industry lacks for historical preservation. Even I'll take that one step beyond just preservation, but also I would say historical perspective. I mean, I don't think they're certainly out there. You and I have talked many times. You and I at one point actually talked about doing a multi-part documentary series about the history of video games. And there are history of video games type of books and documentaries out there, but they're few and far between. And I think they are not robust to the degree which they could be, particularly for an industry that is as relevant as any entertainment medium in the history of humanity, if not more so, because it's driving technology to a degree that I think even in mediums like film have never done. I mean ubiquitous society-wide technology like computers, the internet, virtual reality, augmented reality. Stuff is all being born out of video gaming. Yet there's precious little documentation of the history of this industry and medium. Moreover, I mean, we've talked about, you were talking about museums, for example, that kind of preservation. There are scattered throughout the country a couple of video game museums, but if you watch the GameSpot video that we've linked to, you'll see that they are small endeavors, run generally by a small group of people. Yeah. You asked the question, Brent, why do we think video game companies are reticent to allow these games to be preserved in this way? And frankly, the answer to that, I think, is very simple, and it's money. And money in the context of wanting to protect their IP. I mean, I think the attitude of a gaming company is always, we don't want to relinquish control over any aspect of this game that we ultimately might one day maybe want to monetize.
Right. So, I think it's that, and then I also think though that they
look at it as a product. It's a financial property and nothing more. And so,
I don't think that they necessarily share our view that there's some historical significance to it. I mean, it would be like McDonald's preserving, a hamburger.
Well, except that McDonald's is
a terrible example.
Well, yes,
I was just thinking about what that would look like a preserved McDonald's hamburger.
It's not a fair comparison for two reasons. Number one, McDonald's, I'm sure, does preserve parts of their history, and number two, when you talk about things like, it's tough. I was going to say, I mean, you talk about things like McDonald's toys, for example, toys they might have put in the Happy Meal, boxes from the Happy Meals, things that could be saved or preserved. Yeah. McDonald's is not suing museums who decide to preserve those things.
That's a very good point.
Or blocking them from doing so. So I don't want to intimate that there's actually been a lawsuit, because I don't know that. But McDonald's is not blocking museums from archiving what comes out of their restaurant, hamburgers notwithstanding. Part of the problem, maybe, Brent, is the lack of formal programs that are doing this. And maybe perhaps if there were more formal programs, I mean, really, fundamentally, I suppose we have to look at the laws, the IP laws that protect these properties.
That's certainly a hurdle in doing this.
And my guess is write some form of language into the legal code that exempts archival entities.
Well, the thing that I was thinking is that this is almost certainly something that would have to come from within the industry. Like, this would almost certainly have to be something spearheaded by the ESA or the ESRB. I mean, I understand that that's not exactly the ESRB's focus, but through some sort of organization that already exists, that is comprised of people within the game industry. It seems like it would have to come from within the industry. Some sort of unified effort to create, I think, a standard, whether that's merely policy or whether there's technology that is included in that, but some sort of standard for preservation of games. Maybe some guidelines about timetables. Like, okay, so at the point where you're going to end of life a title, which is to say when you are no longer actively manufacturing a game, when you're no longer actively selling a digital copy of a game, how long after that time, should that game become eligible for archival purposes? I think that some of the hesitance on the industry to do this is that perhaps in their minds, there is a blurry gray line between piracy and archiving, and I think that does kind of speak to what you were saying earlier about, perhaps their attitude is, well, look, I mean, if people are archiving our game, that just means that they're just stealing it. They're playing our game without paying us money for it. That's bullshit. And of course,
I can't imagine that that's what they're thinking. I mean, that if you to say you're going to say the Smithsonian is pirating, that's bullshit. The Smithsonian is archiving our game. I think that's a bit of. I think that's a bit of a stretch.
Well, I think the Smithsonian example is a bit of a stretch. I understand that there's been a video game exhibit at the Smithsonian, but I think that when people talk about archiving games, they're talking about the ability for people like you and I to go back and play games. The Smithsonian, like the fact that the Smithsonian has a video game exhibit, does not mean that you and I can roll up there anytime we want to and hop on a couple of their PCs to play World of Warcraft. You know?
Oh, see, I was thinking of I was using it in the context of, so there's both things going on here. One is to make them available for play, just like books and music and film will always be available for you to access.
Yeah.
Every book ever written, as far as I know, and every movie ever made, right? And then there's the archiving it in terms of like a robust video game museum, the way there is, Rock and Roll Hall of Fame or music museums throughout the country.
But, that's the thing. I mean, there's a distinction there. I mean, there's a difference between,
I agree. Yep.
Me pulling a Chuck Berry record off the wall and actually, going and seeing his 335 at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Both of which are pretty sweet.
Yes, I agree.
But no, you're right. I mean, that's the thing is I think about, Brent, for example, I no longer have a last generation console. And while I know that people's response to this might be, well, don't worry too much about it because it's probably coming. But the idea that I may never play Red Dead Redemption again is bothersome to me. Or Journey, which I know is coming for the PS4, but are they going to make it for the PS5 and the PS6 and the PS7? Yep. That's a game that I want to play with my child. I mean, that's and the idea that I might never play Journey or Red Dead Redemption again really bothers me.
I agree. I mean,
or that to do so, I have to get it from a pirated source.
I'm keeping an Xbox One. I don't know if you can see it behind me, but I've got my Xbox Elite right there, and I keep that in the house. And the only game that I have for that is Red Dead Redemption.
You mean Xbox 360?
Excuse me. Yeah. My Xbox 360 Elite is right back there, and I mean, I own that, so I can play Red Dead Redemption should the need ever strike.
Yeah, no, I mean it's an interesting thing, and you're right. There are ROMs you can get now, and basically, they talk about in this video, Brent, the idea that essentially the people that we as fans of gaming rely on to archive these games for play are pirates.
That's exactly right.
We're actually fundamentally relying on pirates to be able to play these games,
and it doesn't have to be that way.
It doesn't have to be that way at all, as a matter of fact. I mean, they're having some sort of legacy system in place. I think not having some sort of legacy system in place is a real shortcoming on the part of the industry. And he brings up an interesting example of a game that was something of a nothing game, and I can't remember what it was called, Brent. I'm talking about the GameSpot video again, where one of the designers had been working for, I think he said the might have been the Skylanders team. I can't remember.
Okay.
They were working for another team currently, and he passed away. And he had worked on a game many, many years ago, 25 years ago, in which the end credits were actually you walking through the offices at EA or something.
Oh.
And interacting with each. You walk up to the desk, and it tells you who the person is and what they do.
That's fascinating.
It was interesting, and this guy was in that game, and so his coworkers who had worked with him and knew about this, and after he passed away, they had wanted to go back and find this, and they wanted to show it in a reel and look at it and maybe even emulate it. And this was a nothing game, and if this guy hadn't archived this, that might be lost forever.
Yeah, it's. I think it's short-sighted on the part of the industry to not realize that there is a historically significant reason to preserve games. It took the film industry in the 20th century a very long time before they kind of understood that preservation of film was something that was important. And I mean, we've lost films. I mean, there are hundreds, maybe thousands. There are hundreds of movies that have been lost to time.
Right.
And we should learn from that lesson, and we should make sure that the same does not happen to video games. Because we're not as far along as film was when people began to realize, oh wait, if we don't actually work at this, if we don't take steps, then it's going to be just like you're saying. I mean, like, as far as the film industry is concerned, this is product sitting on a shelf, and at some point they're paying more to rent the shelf than the product is worth, and they're going to destroy it.
I can't.
That almost happened to Blade Runner. And so it's one of those things that I think that we ought to care about, and we ought to be working at finding a solution right now, a solution that works for everybody. Because there's solutions right now, but it does involve piracy. And I'm perfectly open to the industry exploring an option that does not involve piracy. One of them is to keep selling your fucking game. And I'm going to talk in the road about just such an example that does kind of tie in with this, with the game from my past. But I think that there's no excuse in the sense that there's clear financial incentives, to keep your game in the marketplace and to allow people to purchase it.
Well, with the exception of course, the online piece of it, because that requires maintaining servers.
Right. Exactly what I was going to say. And that's the one thing that they're going to have to eventually decide. They're going to have to either make the decision, okay, we're end-of-lifing this game. We're going to have to let people run private servers if there's going to be any kind of preservation for it. I mean, that's the only solution in cases
or at least leave the tool, right, the tools out there, so if somebody wanted to, at some point, that they could and legally make it accessible. And the example they use is a perfect example of World of Warcraft. 50 years is a game that's just huge in our industry, and 50 years from now, no one will be able to play it.
Think about all of the really historically significant, culturally significant, like TV shows as an example that were on television before you and I were ever born. Things All in the Family, or I'm trying to think of Good Times.
Not before I was born.
Well, you are you're a little bit older than I am.
Not before I was born.
Well, think about something from the '60s, but
the Honeymooners.
Yeah, I mean, but think about those, things that really defined a particular era in history, or whatever. Yes. If it weren't for syndication, you and I would never have seen those things, and it's important to see those things. It's important, I think, to be able to look at the art from decades past, because it is very informative. I think that the game industry needs to get out in front of this. There's no reason not to. There's no technical hurdle to making it happen. The only thing not making it happen is basically they're choosing to not make it happen, and that's not a good enough excuse.
Well, or not necessarily choosing to not make it happen, but at the very least not choosing to make it happen. I mean, they may not be making a conscious decision saying we don't want this to happen.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
But they may just not see it. It may not even be on their radar, right, or it may not be of enough value that they even want to look at it or address it. And I think they should realize that it is of significant cultural value. I mean, for God's sakes, Brent, I can't even find a copy of Porky's anywhere now. and how am I going to share that with my child?
Okay, so we are here in the road. And I say in the road, I mean, we are in the road.
We are on the road.
We're on the road. We're in the road, in the middle of it, barreling down it. Lauren.
I'm going to start doing sound effects.
Yeah, please don't. Please don't. Talk about Wolfenstein.
I'm like a white Jewish middle-aged Michael Winslow. Most of my sounds start with
mostly start with consonants. Talk about Wolfenstein,
or at least have a few in the middle.
The Old Blood.
Wolfenstein The Old Blood, Brent. So this is the standalone expansion pack that just came out for $19.99 on PC, PS4, and PS1. Yep. This is the expansion pack to Wolfenstein The New Order, one of my favorite games of 2014, and one of, if not the best single-player first-person shooters to come out in the last several years. Wolfenstein The Old Blood, from what I can tell, I've played about 3 hours of it now, and I am... I think on chapter 4-ish out of 8. Okay. So I'm guessing this is 6 to 7 hours. Right, and it is fantastic, Brent. It is in every way. It's fantastic. It continues to do so well what I thought the first one did, which was pay homage to the classic first-person shooters of yore, Return to Castle Wolfenstein. And in this one, you actually return to Castle Wolfenstein.
Excellent.
But it pays homage in not just in tone, but also in mechanics and level design to the days of yore, and it's just wonderfully comfortable in that way. And for those of you that played first-person shooters in the early 2000s, you will recognize the difference in the feeling of this game mechanically when you play it. It will feel like something you haven't played in a while. In addition to paying homage to the shooters of yore, they also do a fantastic job of updating it and making it and polishing it and making it beautiful, making the mechanics more smooth, adding a couple of other different mechanics like dual wielding. Not that wasn't around back then, but I don't believe you could dual wield in Return to Wolfenstein. I could be wrong. Maybe you could. So they add some new mechanics in Wolfenstein The New Order, and then for this, the next step, Wolfenstein The Old Blood, they take The New Order and add some twist to it as well. So some new weapons, some new gameplay types, and I don't mean like... I don't want to give anything away because part of the fun of it is discovering the new stuff. But there's new melee stuff, new throwables, new weapons, along with the great story and the same harkening back. And it's fantastic. fantastic in every way, and I'm just thrilled to have another piece. And if you did not play the New Order, and you don't want to spend the money on the New Order because you're unsure, I stand as wholeheartedly behind the Old Blood as I did the New Order. And for $20, if you want to just check it out to see if it's for you, I highly recommend it. Tons of fun.
Very cool.
Yep.
For my own part, I've got a few games this week. I've played a little bit of Skyrim, a little bit of Alien Isolation. Haven't dived into those too much, although I did. I'm continuing to go through and refine sort of my mod setup for Skyrim, and so I'm always kind of just plinking around with that. But I'm doing side quest stuff, and people are right. There's some really really interesting side quests. I just got done with this one called A Night to Remember, where you get into a drinking contest in a tavern, and you wake up in a temple on the other side of Skyrim with some priestess chastising you about coming in drunken the night before, muttering something about a wedding and a goat. And as soon as that line of dialogue hit me, I was like, best mission ever. And then you gotta go back and try to reconstruct the night. I mean, it's basically a movie. It's basically The Hangover, but happening in Skyrim. Yes. The inventiveness of that game, the depth of it is just remarkable. Several people have recommended to me to get a couple of the really big kind of the mod based, the community based DLC like Falkreath. And I'm going to go to those. It's just that I've got other games that I kind of want to play at the moment, and so I'm trying to restrain myself a little bit. A little bit of Alien Isolation, not much to report there. I'm still in the very very early stages of that game, and I've just made it onto the facility. I don't know, the space station, whatever, where you kind of start the game, and already things are going wrong. But nothing much to report there.
All right. Next up for me, Brent, is The Witcher 2. So in preparation for The Witcher 3, which nobody's calling The Witcher 3, they're calling it The Witcher Wild Hunt. But in preparation for The Witcher Wild Hunt, I decided maybe I'll download The Witcher 2 again. As I mentioned to you, of course, I hooked up the computer to the television and started playing games using the controller. And I thought maybe The Witcher 2 will be more affable to me using the controller. And I was right. In fact, I found it less annoying, and I found the combat significantly less annoying. I was watching a lot of I was playing it with mouse and keyboard when I played it previously, and I was watching a lot of the stuff, The Witcher 3 footage, and I thought, the way that the not the weapon wheel, but the throwables wheel and all that works, I think could work really well if you pulled it up with a trigger, and I just thought it might work really well with the controller. So I decided to try it, and in fact, it is better, and I found myself much more deft at the combat and getting through sections of that game that I wasn't able to get through before, that I struggled with before, which is great. It also reminded me, however, Brent, and this doesn't cause me any worry with regard to Witcher 3, because they've actually talked about this, but it reminded me why I was so put off of that game to begin with. And one of the things that I just couldn't, that just really rubbed me the wrong way was when you start that game. I don't know. Did you? I don't remember. No. Did you play this game? I can't remember.
The Witcher 2? No.
Yeah. Okay. So it's the most odd thing. So when it asks you if you want to start with a tutorial, and you say yes, and then you launch into the game to a level, and you start playing, and you literally you take one step, and it pops up with this dialogue box instantly about how to do something in the game, and it's just paragraph filled with text. So you sit there and read it, and you're like, okay, and then you hit escape or whatever or back to get the text box gone, and you lift up your leg to take the next step, and there's another dialogue box, and it's a full paragraph.
It's a minefield of education.
And you're like, okay, and you sit there and read it, and you're like, okay, I get it, back. And you take one step, and you think you're going to be able to walk now, and you lift up the other leg, and now all of a sudden there's this other, and you're just like, just let me play the game. I don't need a paragraph on how to walk forward. And I understand some people do, but there's no, it's just that first 60 seconds or 120 seconds in that game are two of the most off-putting minutes I've ever had in an opening to a video game. And so it was just really interesting, and it really got me off on the wrong foot. And now it's weird because very funny.
Got him off on the wrong foot. He says,
God. "Oh, boo."
Do me a favor.
But now
go hit yourself in the face with a hammer.
I don't know if I'm going to continue to play the game, Brent, only because I'm replaying the first about 3 hours of the game, and in doing so, I don't like. I just keep hitting A to go through the story because I don't want to sit there and listen to the cutscenes that I've listened to already twice when I've tried to play the game previously. But in doing that, I'm sort of removing myself from what is one of the major points of the game, which is the story.
Like the whole thing. You just ought to go watch some Let's Plays and be done with it. It's like,
you know what? No, I wanted to play it, but in all honesty, I think at this point we're so close. We're a week away from The Witcher 3. I wasn't playing it because I felt like I needed to play it to know the story. I was playing it because I needed some juice to hold me until the Witcher 3 came out. I needed something in my veins, and so at this point, we're close enough. I think I'm just going to give up on The Witcher 2. Preload tonight. The Witcher 3 is available for preload. Tomorrow, Brent, I don't know if you know this, tomorrow, Tuesday morning, 7 a.m., I believe, is when the review embargo lifts for The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt. So
a full week ahead of the game's release. Wow,
that's right.
It's.
I think we're close enough that I'm going to delete The Witcher 2 and just move on to The Witcher 3 and call it water under the bridge.
That's cool. Well, I mean, I understand what you're saying about needing your game juice. I just think you're looking for it in all the wrong places.
I got plenty of game to play too.
Because if you knew what was up, you'd be heading over to GOG.com. Maybe even through the Galaxy client, and you would be getting yourself some Star Trek 25th Anniversary sweet-ass action. This is the game that I alluded to in the last section. This is the game that I've been looking to preserve all these years. I've got copies of this game at some point in the last 10 or 15 years. I drug out my original game. I managed to find an old floppy drive, and I managed to load this thing up and get it working with DOSBox. But anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. Star Trek 25th Anniversary, one of my favorite games of all time, a classic adventure title on the PC by Interplay, my favorite PC developer of the 90s. And this is a game I played ad nauseum when I was a kid. It was amazing graphically back in the day. A lot of colors. Not so much in the way of pixels, but a lot of colors. Anyway, Star Trek 25th Anniversary is this fascinating game that was created as really just like a playable version of the show. Like each of the levels in the game is like an episode of the television series, and they're paced the same. They deal with a lot of the same themes, a lot of the same particulars. Like the first mission in the game, you go to a planet of colonists that are part of a religious sect that are saying, we are being attacked by demons. And so the Federation is sending you there to assess the situation, find out what's going on. Well, it turns out it's not demons. It turns out that there is a machine that is guarding something on this planet, and the machine conjures whatever your greatest fear is. And of course, for these religious people, it's demons, and of course for Kirk, it's STDs. No, I'm kidding. It's Klingons, and so. But anyway, the point is that there is a reasonable explanation. This is a theme that you saw in Star Trek a lot. Sort of rationale over irrational, and you play through the mission. There's problem solving. You got to talk to people. You got to pick things up and figure out where to use them, and all that stuff that you would expect from adventure gaming. And you get to the end of the episode, you're given like an evaluation by the admiral that you're reporting to, and then there's like cool little banter between Kirk and Spock and McCoy on the bridge, just like at the end of a classic Trek episode. The people who put this together were so particular about sort of recreating all of those little beats that made the show great. It's actually one of the best examples of a video game that that's tied into an existing property and is kind of paying homage to it. It's actually one of the best examples of that that's ever been. It's a very, very fun game. There was also a sequel to it called Judgment Rights, both really great in terms of puzzles and gameplay and everything. They were on sale, I think, for like $5-6, something like that, at GOG. I think they'll be coming to Steam eventually, but they were at GOG first, so I went ahead and got those, and that's what I've been kind of using the Galaxy client to play around with and to play those games. The other cool thing about this is that this video game was done at a time when nobody gave a shit about Star Trek. And so they actually managed to have the entire cast voice their characters in this game.
I was just going to ask you if this was
fully voiced, son.
I honestly, I was going to ask you the question, like, sort of off, like knowing you were going to say, of course it's not fully voiced, Lauren.
Yeah, it's fully voiced by the original cast.
The entire game is fully voiced? Game.
And
I might have to get that. So I want to know, when you're replaying it, does it hold up?
Yeah, dude. If you like, I mean, that's the thing. If you like point and click adventure games, if you like that gameplay, it's fantastic. I mean, it's absolutely fantastic.
The entire game is fully voiced.
The entire game is fully voiced. And there's actually some. I mean, there's some funny dialogue and stuff. Because there's not exactly dialogue trees, but you have conversation choices. So, like, you as Kirk, you beam down to a planet, and you can say, I'm Captain James T. Kirk of the Federation Starship Enterprise. We understand that you're having some difficulty. We're here to help. Or the other option is, so I hear you're seeing demons. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Like, you could be, like, really kind of snarky. You can talk down to people. You have those options, and so Shatner's like doing all of those dialogue choices, and some of it's really funny. I mean, like even if you don't choose that one to go with in game, it's really funny to listen to all the options that are available.
That might be. So I struggle. I was looking at the game because I had never seen it, and I looked it up, and I struggle. The graphics don't bother me necessarily, but when there's no voice and it's just a text adventure, that I'm kind of not personally interested in.
You should totally check it out. And the stupid thing is,
but you said
the other voice acting, like the other characters in the game, they're not bad. They're really not bad. I mean, particularly given how bad some of the voice acting was in games in the 90s, it's very, very passable. Some of it even borders on good.
You mentioned, Brent, you said I got it working with
DOSBox, yeah, that's an emulator on the PC. And
so, do you need that, or can I just buy this game and download it and play it?
Okay, like I needed DOSBox like 10, 15 years ago when I was like trying to install this thing off my old floppies. The CD-ROM version was the one that had the full voices. That was not the one that I owned. But anyway, the point is that you needed that emulator back then. So I installed this from GOG, and I'm just digging around in the directory because I'm curious, and GOG is shipping it with DOSBox. So you don't have to do anything. I mean, like, all you do is install it and play it, and it runs. But the point is that the game is running in emulation through DOSBox, which I thought was very fun.
All right, is it controller compatible?
No, it's.
I can't imagine it would be.
It's mouse and keyboard.
I don't care, but I may have to pick this up for $5.99.
Dude, it's righteous. It's so righteous. It's one of my.
That's awesome.
I mean, this is one of the first games I ever played that I truly fell in love with.
That's awesome.
It's great to be playing it again, and I can play it on my MacBook. I can play it on my fucking computer. It's great.
Right.
All right,
that's awesome.
Sorry to take so long with that.
That's okay. Last up in the road, Brent, is I downloaded and played the Talos Principle. It went on sale, actually, with the Humble Bundle. By the way, having its spring sale. It's, I believe, 14 days long. It changes every day at, I believe, 1 p.m. Eastern time. And they had Talos Principle on sale for, I think it was $29.99. And I remember hearing about it and was very interested in it. But it was still a little bit pricey, I thought, so I wanted to check it out. So I downloaded the demo and I played it. I didn't buy the game, Brent, but it was a really, really interesting game. It's kind of along the lines of a Portal. It's a puzzle game. And you can get the demo right now on Steam. It's free, obviously, and it was super interesting. And I want to pick it up. I still think at $29.99 it's a little bit more than I want to pay right now, especially because of what I have coming down the pike. Right. But I thought it was interesting. It's supposed to be not just a puzzle game, but also a sort of meditation on life itself. And you can see that in the demo. I mean, you can kind of see how they're going that way. Obviously, I can't determine whether or not that becomes a little bit sort of banal or not as you progress through it. But the reviews on this game are fantastic. It had an 85 overall on Metacritic. Many reviewers gave it in the high to mid 90s. So I highly recommend it if you were into Portal, if you're into puzzle games. This definitely is an interesting looking game. I personally am just waiting for it to come down in price just a little bit more. That is excellent. I cannot hear Talos Principle and not think of that guy at the statue of Talos in Whiterun screaming at you as you walk by about Talos, who walked among us as a man, as you're going up the steps into Dragon's Reach. That disciple of Talos
that's always out there proselytizing. Yes. Anyway, that's not really related. Okay, guys, we are going to ride into the sunset now, and so we've got our last.
See, that's what we're calling this last section.
Thank you very much for all of the great suggestions on that. We really enjoyed reading through those; they were very fun. Lauren, what's the last thing for you this week?
Well, I feel like maybe it should have been the sales on Humble Bundles, but since I did mention that in the last one, this is going to be my topic as we move into the sunset, Brent, and that is, and I mentioned we'd talk about this a little later, NVIDIA announced a promotion with the GTX series, the 9 series GPUs, that if you bought them now, you would get Arkham Knight and The Witcher 3 for free.
I missed that shit by like 4 days.
Arkham Knight and The Witcher 3. Yeah. So, Brent, with that in mind, with the advent of the upcoming release of the Oculus Rift, and of course, those two games coming out, and I already own both of those two games, I decided to purchase myself a new video card, and I picked up an NVIDIA GTX 970 from Gigabyte.
What do you know?
It's a 4 gig card. It's gotten Gigabyte has theirs overclocked to an 1178 hertz base overclock. So that's what it is upon arrival, and it can go up to somewhere in the 13s, making it, not too far below the old 980. But I do know that the Oculus Rifts that were being run at the last demo, I can't remember what it was, GDC or something like that, where they were running on 980s, single 980s. But I'm sure that the 970 will do just fine, at least for now. With regard to VR. So I've got a 970, Brent. It came in the mail just today. I picked it up about an hour ago. It is sitting right now. It is waiting to be installed. But unfortunately, I have to go get an air conditioner before I can install it because being able to sleep is slightly more important.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you on that. I like both. I like really awesome video cards, and I also like air conditioning. So,
well, my video card will benefit from the air conditioner as well. But yeah, so very soon here I will be installing today or tomorrow. I will be installing my new GTX 970, which I'm very excited about.
Congratulations! And
pulling out the old. I'm upgrading from an AMD 7950, which I'll then turn around and sell, hopefully for somewhere in the neighborhood of about $175.
Yeah, I'm hoping to get something like that for my old one too. But yeah, man, that's cool. So we're both rolling 970 heavy here. We ought to.
That's right. I'm excited about it.
Like if we had actual cuts, we would have like a 970 patch.
That's exactly right. Straight from the 970, which is Colorado Springs, Colorado, by the way, not a particularly badass zip code.
Anyway.
Area code, I mean. So if you're interested, you're looking to buy a new graphics card, now might be the time for you, and you can pick up Arkham Knight and The Witcher 3 for free. This runs until June 1st.
All right, the thing that I want to talk about as we ride into the sunset is, and you probably are already aware of this, Castlevania has got a successor. It is called Bloodstained, and there's a Kickstarter right now in much the same way that Mighty Number 9 is sort of the crowdfunded successor to Mega Man. Bloodstained is the crowdfunded successor to Castlevania from producer Koji Igarashi, and Polygon has got a cool, like they just went around with Igarashi for a day or two, and they interviewed him extensively about the game and the campaign, and Polygon's got a write-up on that that's very cool. I'm linking to an article that does link to that interview, but the main point of this article is that the Kickstarter for Bloodstained was $500,000. They did that in less than a day, so they've succeeded at this point. And there's a very interesting part of that interview where Igarashi talks about how he had funding in place to bring the game to multiple platforms, PC, Mac, Linux, Xbox One, PlayStation 4, but that the investors needed to be convinced that there was demand for it. And he says, we'll do a crowdfunding campaign, and you'll see that there's a lot of people out there that want to play this kind of game. And so they did the crowdfunding campaign, and I think at this point we can declare that a successful way of convincing your investors that people want to play the game. Bloodstained sounds very cool. It's going to be very much in the vein of Castlevania. Definitely awesome 2D sprite artwork and exploration and of course lots of cool weapons and all that kind of stuff. You can read more about that. I won't take up your time with it, but it looks cool. Congratulations to Igarashi and everybody who is working on Bloodstained, and I'm anxious to see where things go from here.
That's awesome, man. I think that it's about time we put out on the Kickstarter for our game to prove to everybody,
obviously,
what a great What a great idea!
that 2D side-scrolling brawler that we've been talking about doing all these years.
Yes, with Woody Allen as the lead character, and Nebuchadnezzar Jewish.
But that's the thing; it's a buddy thing. It's Dennis Leary and Woody Allen.
That would actually be absolutely awesome.
I agree.
All right, Brett, with that, we're going to call it the end of yet another incredible show. And as usual, we want you guys to comment on everything we talked about, whether it's Bloodstained or the promotion from NVIDIA. Of course, the games we talked about while we were riding on the road: Talos Principle, Star Trek, the 25th anniversary, Witcher 2, Skyrim, Alien Isolation, Wolfenstein The Old Blood. The topic while we were hanging out in the clubhouse this week about the preservation of video games, both from an archival standpoint vis-a-vis museums and also the access for gamers to continue to play them over time. And then when we were out in the garage, we talked a little bit about the Rift shipping in Q1 2016, Ether 1, the trailer for PlayStation 4, and the fact that it is available as a PlayStation Plus download for the month of May, and GOG's announcement of GOG Galaxy. Make sure you check that out. Comment on these topics and anything related to gaming. As usual, he is Brent Adams. I am Lauren Baumgart. And remember, you don't stop playing because you get old. You get old because you stop playing.